Hello everyone, my name is Anthony and welcome back for another virtual Lunch and Learn. This week we'll be discussing your heart, its health, and how to train to maximize it. As always, we want to mention this information is intended for educational purposes only and should not be interpreted as medical advice. We'll begin discussing the history of the human race, followed by common diseases, and finally how research suggests training your heart. Enjoy! First, let's begin by diving into history, our ancestral origins. Our species evolved to be continuously moving. We lived a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, having to go out of our way to procure nourishment and other resources. Additionally, we had developed survival techniques within ourselves that helped to prevent starvation. From the ability to be able to slow metabolism to breaking down proteins for energy, our bodies will do whatever it takes to survive, no matter how severe. And since food was so scarce during this time, civilizations rarely had to worry about overeating, a common problem today. Because of the constant physical activity needed to make it through the day and limited food supply, studies have found that our hunter-gatherer ancestors were quite healthy and relatively free of today's modern cardiovascular diseases. So what happened to us? How do we compare to our ancestors? We are much less active, have a relative abundance of food, and live in a world of technology and its resulting luxuries. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. Our species has been able to use our intelligence to identify and solve problems, one after another, to better trade, travel, energy, food production, and shelter. We are continuously mastering our environment to match our innovation and desire to live as efficiently as possible. But just because we developed the technology to make our lives better, it doesn't mean our physiology changed with it. Our bodies are still programmed to reserve energy, meaning we like to conserve fat stores in preparation for a starvation event. This drive to save energy impacts our physiology as well with regards to physical activity. As we increase our technological abilities and made our lives easier, we have seen a substantial decrease in physical activity throughout time. We can hop in a car to travel, go to the grocery store to get everything we need for days, and are continuously increasing our interest in media rather than leisure movement outside of the home. We are so invested in making life as easy as possible that companies are making technology that allows us to buy anything right from our home without ever having to step outside, from online shopping to our groceries. For a small financial cost, you can save a significant amount of time, but we don't seem to be using that free time for movement. As you can see in the graph, we are constantly losing physical activity as we age. So what does this do to our physiology? Well, as we decrease in physical activity but increase in food consumption, especially highly processed foods commonly found within the Western diet, we have increased our incidence of cardiovascular disease, a problem our ancestors didn't face. Today, cardiovascular diseases lead in all-cause mortality. With heart disease at number 1 and stroke at number 5, cardiovascular diseases pose a significant risk to our healthcare system. With all the research and advancements in technology to control cardiovascular incidents before they happen, and the procedures in place for when they do, our ability to prevent death from these incidents should be greatly reduced, and overall, they have been. But with the increase in sedentary lifestyle and larger percentage of older populations within the U.S., cases of cardiovascular diseases continue to increase. So yes, eventually the number of deaths each year may decrease, but we must consider whether this is due to advancements in medicine or improvements in physical activity. It is important to remember that cardiovascular disease is not normal, and we should strive to be rid of it completely rather than just covering it with advancements in medication. So how do cardiovascular events like heart attacks and stroke occur? It's important to understand what we can't see going on in the body to grasp the severity of these diseases. Many cardiovascular diseases can be traced back to plaque buildup within various arteries. As you can see in the first image, you have a healthy artery diagrammed on the left, leading towards a blockage of blood flow due to plaque on the right. The right vessel may look the most intimidating, but don't underestimate the significance of the middle two. As you can see, when plaque initially begins to build, the blood struggles to make its way through the space left for it. To compensate for this, the heart must pump harder to effectively develop the pressure needed to transfer blood throughout the body. This is why ankle edema, or fluid buildup within the ankle, can be an indicator of heart disease. The heart is not able to produce enough force to get the blood down the leg and back up. Additionally, it is this increased pressure, along with the hardening of the blood vessels due to plaque buildup, that result in hypertension. As the heart pumps harder against inelastic vessels, your blood pressure values will rise. Another important consideration for when your heart begins to work harder to work against plaque is the size change it must undergo. Looking at the image on the right, you will see a normal heart and a heart with a left ventricular hypertrophy, or enlarged left ventricular walls. In short, the left ventricle of the heart is responsible for sending blood throughout the body, and the left ventricular walls contract to develop the force needed to transport the blood. When the heart begins to work harder to combat plaque buildup, the walls on the left ventricle increase in size, similar to any muscle in your body after you've trained it. The problem with this is that it leaves less room within the left ventricle, which means less blood is able to be transported out. This in turn results in a need for a higher heart rate to make sure that the same amount of blood is being delivered throughout the body. This is referred to as cardiac output, or heart rate times stroke volume. When you are most likely familiar with heart rate, stroke volume is the amount of blood that leaves your heart from your left ventricle to the rest of your body. Now, it is important to note, however, that athletes too will experience left ventricular hypertrophy due to exercise. So how is exercise beneficial in reducing cardiovascular disease? Well, while they may experience left ventricular hypertrophy, an athlete's heart will also increase the size of the left ventricle cavity, meaning it can fit more blood within its walls, which in turn leads to a higher stroke volume and higher force output. To maintain cardiac output, the heart does not have to beat as frequently, which is why athletes have a lower heart rate at rest and during exercise. And since they don't have as much plaque buildup and such stiff arteries, athletes won't experience high blood pressure. Another benefit to exercise is an increase in the number of high-density lipoproteins, or HDLs, throughout the body. These HDLs help to remove plaque within the arteries, unlike their counterparts, low-density lipoproteins, or LDLs, that deposit plaque within the arteries. So, now let's discuss the role of plaque buildup with two severe cardiovascular events, heart attack and strokes. The heart has its own blood vessels outside of the heart that supply it blood, and the brain has its own set of arteries as well. If blood is blocked at either location, tissues will quickly start to fail, and you'll find yourself with a heart attack or stroke. So what has research been doing to solve cardiovascular illnesses? With the increase in sedentarism and concurrent rise in cardiovascular disease, research began looking for correlations between risk factors and disease diagnosis. From the first image, we can see the significant impact of physical activity on risk factor status, along with obesity. Similarly, we can look at the impact of smoking with the second graph and its effect on hypertension status. We can see that those who smoke make up the majority of the hypertensive population, while those who don't smoke tend to not be hypertensive as well. This is because smoking also hardens the walls of arteries, making them more susceptible to high blood pressure. So, as the country begins waning off of smoking behaviors, we could see a positive result in the amount of hypertensive patients. When it came to treating cardiovascular illnesses, researchers quickly turned to understanding the role of physical activity in reducing risk, and that's where our current recommendation of 30 minutes of activity a day came from. And since we refer to this disease as cardiovascular diseases, it made sense that researchers started by looking at aerobic activity, what we today call cardio. But with a continuous rise in disease rate, research is taking other forms of activity into consideration as well. Researchers are really starting to question what is meant by the term cardio, with an increasing number refraining from the term and going back to terms like aerobic and anaerobic training, as both have positive effects on the heart. If you look at the image here, you can see a study looking at high intensity interval training, or HIIT, as an anaerobic method of training against a moderate intensity cardiovascular training, or aerobic form of training, both of which are placed against a control. After a 12-week training period, both the HIIT and moderate intensity training groups were able to significantly decrease their blood pressure. However, the HIIT group also significantly decreased their blood pressure beyond the decrease seen within the moderate intensity aerobic group. Furthermore, research has been looking into resistance training as a form of anaerobic training to reduce cardiovascular disease, a form of exercise previously thought to be completely separate from the heart. But if we look at the function of our muscles, we see that it completely relates to the ability of the heart to do work. Each time a muscle contracts throughout your body, they massage your blood vessels, acting as a secondary pump to help your blood return to your heart. This in turn increases the amount of blood returning to the heart, resulting in a higher stroke volume, thus allowing your body to reduce its heart rate to maintain cardiac output, as we spoke about earlier. This is why your heart rate may not increase as much as it would when you train traditional cardio on a treadmill or bike, but it doesn't mean your heart isn't working harder. This can help with problems like ankle edema, as your lower leg muscles will be able to help your blood return to the heart against gravity, rather than pulling at your ankles. Additionally, diets have been looked at to improve hypertension, such as the DASH diet or dietary approach to stop hypertension, and Mediterranean diet, both of which we have discussed in previous Lunch and Learns. So, now that we understand the importance of a healthy heart and some of the research going into helping to reduce the problem, let's discuss our current guidelines. We still have the traditional 150 minutes of moderate activity a week, or 30 minutes per day. This can be substituted with 75 minutes of vigorous activity throughout the week as well. So what constitutes moderate or vigorous activity? Well, moderate activity truly is meant to represent daily activities of living, similar to the intensity faced by our hunter-gatherer ancestors. This includes walking, golfing, cleaning, or gardening. Vigorous activity is meant to be activities you can't experience much of, such as jogging, jumping rope, shoveling, or moving furniture. In truth, speed walking can be defined as vigorous activity if intensity is high enough. And while some of these activities may not seem like much, it's important to progressively increase your intensity if able. This can be especially valuable if you're short on time throughout the week. In fact, if you are short on time, it may be valuable to consider exercise over basic physical activity. Since exercise is a subset of physical activity and is meant to be intentional and repetitive, you may be able to get more of a benefit if you're gradually increasing intensity between sessions. Remember, the more intense a session is, the less time you can spend engaged in that activity. Additionally, the World Health Organization, CDC, and the American Heart Association now equally recommend 2 strength training sessions per week to improve heart health and function, assuming each session works each of the major muscle groups like the shoulders, upper back, chest, trunk, hips, and legs. Of course, if you're considering a new addition to your exercise routine, consider consulting with your doctor to ensure you're ready for higher intensities. Additionally, we at the Place for Wellness would love to help you get started. We want to thank you so much for joining us today and learning a little bit about your heart and what you can do for it. We hope you enjoyed today's seminar and were able to take away some valuable information, and that you look to expand your practices when it comes to your cardio workouts, including those anaerobic activities as well, such as HIIT and resistance training. If you ever have any questions about your next step or any question regarding your health and fitness journey, we at the Place for Wellness are always happy to have a conversation with you. Thank you.